Oh boy. Well, it is kind of cold and it's kind of windy. If you will remember back a little while, we did a series on this channel on the Battle of Antietam. And in that, we also talked about the Maryland campaign and McClellan chasing Lee through Maryland before they get to Antietam, and the fight that took place at South Mountain, okay, which is right behind me here. Well, in that South Mountain episode, we covered how there was fighting that took place at Turner's Gap and Fox's Gap, but there's one other major gap in this mountain chain that we didn't cover because we didn't have time, called Crampton's Gap. Well, anyway, we're back in Maryland. I have a flight to catch in a couple of hours, so we don't have much time, but I think that we have enough time to take a look at the fighting that took place at Crampton's Gap. As I mentioned, it is cold and it is windy. I can barely even feel my fingers right now. And this structure that we are looking at right now is known as the Shaffer Farm. We're going to come back to that in just a second. But there's a local historic society here that has put up this sign to help us out a little bit. Now, you can go back and watch those episodes that I did on the Lost Order and the Battle of South Mountain. In short, Lee had put out an order that was essentially going to scatter his army in the invasion of Maryland. And there was a lost order that the Union got a hold of and found out his plans, found out that his army was scattered, and McClellan and the Army of the Potomac are going to be chasing after Lee. So anyway, this right here on this map is showing, the South Mountain chain, and Lee's army makes it over South Mountain. You got Jackson down in Harper's Ferry, which is going to be kind of like down in this area. And as I mentioned, there are three main gaps. So up here you have Turner's Gap. That's where Hooker's 1st Corps was going to be attacking. You have Fox's Gap, where Reno's 9th Corps is going to be attacking. And then down here at Crampton's Gap, well, that's where this guy, Franklin's Corps, is going to be coming through. And right here at the Shaffer Farm is where Franklin was going to be making his headquarters. So you may not recognize the name Franklin, but if you were familiar with the Battle of Gettysburg, well, you probably recognize some of the men who served under him. So Slocum would have had a division command under Franklin. Hancock would have had a brigadier general command. So he would have commanded a brigade under Franklin. But anyway, right here is where they set up their headquarters. And right off here in the distance is where Crampton's Gap is going to be. We're just outside the town of Burkittsville. So you can imagine, Franklin and Slocum and Hancock, being here on this front porch and kind of surveying the valley below. This house has kind of fallen into disrepair, and I believe there's an effort being made to get it restored. I'm seeing some signs here. But anyway, yeah, here's where Franklin's 6th Corps headquarters would have been. Side note, if you ever come to the Shaffer Farm and check out the Battle of Crampton's Gap, well, you can get yourself some free kindling here as well. All right, we're gonna hop back in the rental here and move on down the road a little bit closer to Crampton's Gap. All right, so we've moved just a little further west into the town of Burkittsville. Now, on the morning of September 14th, a small force of Confederates would have occupied this town, and Franklin's 6th Corps is going to be pushing them out. They outnumber them by a wide margin. I've heard as low as 6-1 and as high as 10-1. Okay, so they get pushed out of Burkittsville, and they're going to take up a position right at the base of South Mountain here close to Crampton's Gap. As you can see, I'm currently in the Burkittsville Town Cemetery. Just as a quick side note, Burkittsville and also this cemetery is where the Blair Witch Project was filmed. The Blair Witch Project was a low-budget horror movie that was filmed in the late 90s that ended up doing pretty well. I actually remember going and watching that with a couple of friends, and it was late at night, and on the way home they dumped me out about 3 miles from where I lived and made me walk home in the dark, which was not cool. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But this is where the Blair Witch Project was filmed too. But anyway, you can imagine on September 14th in this valley right here, men from Franklin's 6th Corps all gathering up here, and right here again is South Mountain, and oh my gosh, this wind is terrible up here. So Mahone's brigade is going to be withdrawing to the base of the mountain here, along with some cavalrymen under the command of Munford. They're going to be on the eastern base of the mountain, and about halfway up you're going to have some artillery. So the Union men, this is going to be a tough one. Now, Franklin is going to delay the attack until about like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and there's some speculation as to why. I would guess that he was probably looking at this thing and trying to figure out how he was going to send his men up without them just being slaughtered. Maybe he overestimated how many Confederates were up on that mountain. All right, we're going to go ahead and move up to Crampton's Gap, but there's one other thing that I want to show before we get up to the top of South Mountain. After the battles of South Mountain and Antietam, well, you can just imagine the amount of casualties that had to be dealt with. This right here at the time was the German Reformed Church and served as Hospital D. So this was kind of like a stop for the wounded to get stabilized until they could be moved to a larger hospital up in Frederick. And then this church as well served as a hospital. But there are accounts from this one right here of people talking about how just inside the door there were piles of amputated limbs, and there's blood just running all over the floor. So a lot of misery here. The dead were temporarily interred in the cemetery where I just was, and afterwards the Union were transferred to the Antietam National Cemetery, and the Confederate dead were transferred to Hagerstown. So I have a couple videos that show those cemeteries as well. All right, we're gonna move on up to Crampton's Gap now. Okay, so we've moved out of the town of Burkittsville to the west and moved up on the mountain, and we're doing the thing that we like to do best. We're getting out and we are walking the ground to kind of get an idea of, you know, the terrain and how it would have affected the battle. So at this point we're looking at things more from the Confederate perspective. I don't know if you can really tell it on camera, but boy, from here you can really get a different perspective of this battle. Now, the Confederates that are here at Crampton's Gap are essentially attached to Lafayette McClaw's division. Okay, so McClaw's had been attacking Harper's Ferry from the north, and Mahone's brigade and some cavalrymen under a guy named Mumford were initially stationed at the base of the mountain along a road. I don't know if you can see that road down there, but they are going to be the initial line of defense for the Confederates here. So Franklin, for whatever reason, probably because he was trying to figure out how he was going to crack this line. I mean, the terrain you have to defeat as much as anything, doesn't really launch an attack until later in the afternoon. And then you have artillery about halfway up the mountain here. So it's a little bit harder to tell right now because of the trees, but this is a very commanding position. And as they attack, well, that first line of Confederates is going to fall back. They're going to be coming up this mountain, which, as you may be able to tell, is quite steep. And reinforcing them from the west is going to be Cobb's brigade. They have a map here in Crampton's Gap that might help us to make a little bit more sense of where we are. Okay, so again, here's Burkittsville, where we just were, and you have Franklin's 6th Corps, Slocum's division, also Smith, who are moving up towards Crampton's Gap here. And here along the mountain road is Munford. This is going to be like the first line of defense. This is going to be the first speed bump. And then you have artillery about halfway up the mountain. And then as Munford, as his line is breaking, well, Cobb's Georgia Legion is going to be coming in and taking a position here towards the top of the mountain. There are accounts of this battle that talk about when Cobb's Georgia Legion gets here to Crampton's Gap, they cross the road and they go over a stone fence. Now, I don't know for sure if this is the stone fence, so if this is reconstructed, don't gig me. I'm assuming that this is either the stone fence or a reconstruction of it. But anyway, you can imagine being here on the afternoon of September 14th and being one of these Confederate soldiers and hopping over this wall and getting over to this crest right here to meet the men of Franklin's Corps as they are coming up the mountain here. So anyway, these guys were going to have a tough fight ahead of them because, like I said, they're outnumbered. Some numbers I've seen say 6-1. I've also seen 10-1. But the odds are not in their favor as far as numbers go. But what they do have the advantage of is this terrain. All right, coming back up the hill out of the woods here. And as you can see, as we emerge here towards the gap, we are in a bit of an open area. Also, by the way, there's a memorial up here. What we are looking at is the War Correspondence Memorial. So, yeah, that's pretty cool. But anyway, for Cobb's men, there's going to be a disadvantage that they have here at the top of this hill. For one, it's open, so they're more exposed, and also they don't have the advantage of any reinforcements. So the Union is going to overrun Cobb's men right here in this area. As a matter of fact, their flag is going to be captured, the flag of the Georgia Legion. But the one thing that is going to save them is that Franklin has waited too late to launch this attack, and the cover of darkness is going to save them as they descend down the western slope of the mountain. When you're looking at the Battle of Crampton's Gap, tactically, this is a Union victory. The Union forces come up, they break the Confederate lines and force them out of the gap and onto the western slope of South Mountain. Strategically, you could say that it favors the Confederates. They had a goal, which was to stall the Union forces and give the rest of McLaws' division a chance to get up out of Harper's Ferry and consolidate with the rest of the Army of Northern Virginia. So Franklin was going to stop right here. He wasn't going to follow up this victory because of the darkness that had fallen. And 3 days later, they would find themselves fighting it out on the bloodiest day in American history. Hey, there is more to this story, so click on the playlist link to see the rest of the videos from our Antietam series, and be sure to subscribe to catch all of the new content when it comes out.